It's been long enough since I last talked about manga, so it's time to do that again. I've got like 5 manga, you've got like, I don't know, I'm not really sure how long this video will be. Minutes, so let's just get started. The first manga I'd like to talk about today is from a name you should all be familiar with. Nagabe, the author of Monotone Blue, which I've talked about before, The Wise Wise Beast and the Wizarding Wisdoms, which I've talked about before, and his most popular work, Shulal Rune, The Girl from the Other Side, which I haven't talked about before, but give me some time, I'll probably get to it eventually. However, the manga we'll be talking about today is distinct from all that other stuff for just straight up being NSFW. Not doujin level, but it's definitely intended for older audiences. And the name of this manga is Smell. This adult story is all about 2 high schoolers, Joseph the Border Collie and Noi the Bloodhound. They aren't friends, haven't even spoken to each other, and things probably would have stayed that way if Joseph didn't catch Noi smelling his shirt. From there, it spirals out into growing boys doing growing boy things with each other that I can't show on YouTube. What this manga excels at is 1, having Nagabe's signature beautiful art style. Like seriously, I forgot how good his stuff looked. Nagabe has always had a good art style that's not super anime and instead favors a sort of realistic look that matches the tone of a lot of his stuff. It's not fanciful, it's more like subdued realism. Like if someone told me that these characters being animals was just for style and that these were just regular real people, I'd believe them. Which ironically leads me nicely into the second thing that this manga and Nagabe excels at, that being making the furry characters actually feel furry. Despite the subdued realism of the art style, the characters being animals has an impact on the story and the characters themselves. The characters in the story being dogs isn't just done for show, rather it is relevant in ways that I can't show. You can probably figure out what those ways are because the manga is named Smell. The manga does a good job of capturing teenage awkwardness, for lack of a better term. Now, one space of time where you are aware of sexual things, but they aren't the first priority and not what you think about. Joseph himself thinks Noi is just weird until it hits him and he begins to wonder if Noi's a pervert. It's an interesting read because despite being overtly sexual, it couldn't even be described as ecchi. Like, it's clear that these scenes aren't really for titillation, but story and character. Like, okay, I know this is going to be a bit of a weird reference, but have you ever read Tokyo Ghoul? You know that one moment where Kaneki and Toka consummate their marriage. Wait, you couldn't see that? I was doing air quotes around the words consummate. Actually, I don't think they were married when they did that. What am I doing? Kaneki's marital status doesn't matter right now. The point is that Smell is actually rather tasteful, focused more on the emotion, and it makes the manga surprisingly gripping. I actually reread the manga for this video, which is something I sometimes struggle with, but Smell was engaging the entire way through. It's even got an official English translation coming out this October, so maybe I should make a standalone video about it then. For now, let's just move on to the next manga. Alright, this isn't an advertisement, well it kind of is, but don't skip, I'm just giving you some background info. But I have a Discord server where my Patreon supporters can recommend me manga, link in the description, cough cough. But they hate me, so they tend to recommend me weird isekais. And one of those weird isekais is, I'm gonna need to take a breath for this, hang on. Reincarnated as a misogynistic freak, the sabotaging character that was supposed to spread great misfortunes was fucking damn it. Reincarnated as a misogynistic freak, the sabotaging character that was supposed to spread great misfortune in a Masojo game wants to keep his distance from the heroines. Yeah, like I said, my patrons really love recommending me the worst things I can find, so color me shocked when this manga wasn't garbage, but actually good. The manga is an isekai, all about a dude bullied by women who gets reincarnated as the brat from some rich family in a fantasy world. Okay, I say brat, but it's more like serial assaulter. Like if every maid in your mansion is terrified of you, dude, then all I can say is you deserve to bounce on those stairs like a fucking ball. Whenever I read isekais where the main character essentially replaces someone else, I always feel bad for the original person, you know? Cause like, that original person is either dead or in an I have no mouth and I'm a scream type situation where someone else gets to pilot your body. But here it's like, good riddance, you little pest, you deserved it. But I am once again getting off topic. The world building here isn't anything too fancy, which really suits the story because it's not supposed to be anything complex or neat. There's a powerful church, yada yada yada, there's the main protagonist of the game, Vanity Zero. No, I'm not making that up, it's his name, who possesses the zero magic attribute, yada yada yada. And then there's the main character of the manga, Hawk Gordo, who's supposed to be the standard school bully archetype. So a lot of the talk comes from the fact that this new Isekai hawk isn't the insufferable little twat waffle and actually an okay dude. Well, not an okay dude, he's still a misogynist, and misogyny isn't cool, bro. But honestly, I feel like the author kind of forgets that sometimes, because I honestly forget that sometimes. He has more than a few positive relationships with women, like his sister, the head maid, and even his fiancée. The reason I consider it a furry manga is that Hawk does get some furry servants who show up quite often. We've got the dog man Oliver, who uses guns, which is kind of weird in a fantasy setting, I just now noticed that. And Crescent, his tiger slave. Yep, that's still weird. It's actually fairly interesting to see Hawk go through and navigate this world simply because he's, well, normal for lack of a better term. He doesn't really feel like an anime character either, rather he goes about the story thinking rationally and like any normal person would. He sees the tropes and the proverbial writing on the wall and acts accordingly, deciding to make friends with the protagonist instead of bullying them. It creates this contrast between this trope-filled world and unorthodox main character, which made me like it more than I thought I would. There's the usual tropes like, oh man, I can't believe I'm saying this, the spunky, pretty slave girl heroine, but Hawk intentionally passes over her. Why is that a trope? I swear to God. The real antagonist of the story isn't even a person, rather it's an oppressive and evil church. Like I said, the world is very unoriginal. But instead of getting into any fights with like church guards or whatever, Hawk responds with cunning and guile of his own. It sounds so weird to say, but this misogynist isekai ain't half bad at all. Sadly, it doesn't have an official translation, so there's no way you can buy it in stores. However, I know that if you read manga, that's not enough to stop you. The next manga I'd like to talk about is yet another thing recommended to me by my Patreon Discord. It's called My Lady Just Wants to Relax. It's another isekai, but I'll tell you right now that it practically doesn't matter here. Like yeah, the main character is reincarnated as the character of an otome game or whatever, but it wouldn't be hard to rewrite the entire backstory so it's not isekai at all. The point is, the main character is Ronia, the villainess of the game, who bullies the main character Masano, but eventually gets caught by the prince, breaks up with her, and marries the main girl, happy ever after, blah blah blah. Ronia can see the writing on the wall and doesn't actually bully Masano. Despite that, however, the story doesn't change. And as fate deems it, Ronia is forced to watch her fiancé break up with her and switch to Masano. She may have been kicked out of her noble family in disgrace, but now that the game's over, Ronia's life can finally begin in earnest, doing what she couldn't do in her past life. Run an adorable little cafe. But things aren't so simple because out in this nowhere town Ronia finds herself in, a company of terrifying beastmen work as mercenaries. But the thing is, they're not really that terrifying, the villagers just think they are, but Ronia finds them adorably fluffy. The manga's plot is weird because there are multiple threads that all sort of happen at the same time. On one hand, the problem Ronia faces is keeping her past as a noble secret from the villagers and the beastmen. And then there's the whole other side of the coin, with her noble family and her ex-fiancé trying to find her. But then there's also a demon that has his eyes on Ronia, and it's just a whole mess. There's also the forest spirits that Ronia made friends with, and Ronia getting closer to the mercenaries, and also the feudal lord of the town she lives in. Like seriously, this manga gives One Piece a run for its money when it comes to information density. It has around 39 chapters, which can go up to like 35 pages, and oh my god, does the author make use of every single one. Out of all the manga I read for this video, this is the one that took me the longest, and by a lot. Like reading the entirety of this manga put the video back by like 2 to 3 days. It's that long. The manga is a reverse harem with a bunch of dudes pining after a single female character, and it really shows. We've got all the beastmen from the mercenary company, the court mage, the prince, and the demon. And I'm pretty sure I'm still forgetting some more characters I just don't want to think about. The fact about her that I like the most is that she's into fluffy things and like only fluffy things. Those beastmen can take on kimono Mimi forms, and she is just absolutely not into it to a hilarious degree. Though I do wish Ronia had more flaws, because one of the going themes of the manga is that she's practically perfect. A fact pretty much everyone is willing to remind Schneider of, though that is something I do actually like. The manga actually does have people getting mad at him for breaking up with Ronia publicly, basically calling him out for that huge dick move. Doubly so considering he was actually mistaken about the entire event. I think the manga is at its strongest when it focuses in on Ronia and the Beastmen. None of them are bad characters, and it's great seeing them get closer and closer with Ronia being the only human that they can really open up to. On some levels, it actually makes me wish they were the protagonist instead of Ronia, because then we could avoid the whole thing with the protagonist being too perfect and we could follow along the Beastmen as they slowly learn more and more about Ronia, rather than already knowing what's going on with Ronia and watching her try to keep her secret. Also praise the manga for being very utilitarian with itself, only introducing characters when it needs to and making sure the background details can become relevant later on. The manga also has a nice focus on cooking and food, which I don't hate. If you have some free time, quite a lot of free time, give this one a read. The next manga I'd like to talk about is the one that out of everything on this list that I liked the best. It wasn't a manga I sought out, rather it's one I came across by complete accident, and its name is Neko Ningen, or Catman. It takes place in a world where humans and cat people exist, with most cat people enjoying being showered with attention and affection by humans. However, the protagonist, Hachisuke, is different. He's always been quiet and reserved, with a severe dislike for physical contact, a personality that tends to clash with the world around him and the people in it. There's also his best friend, who's a cat model, Makio, Kurono, the scarred black cat security guard, and Mike-kun, a very rare male calico. The manga is one almost squarely focused on social commentary, with the situation regarding cats and humans being analogous to many things. On one hand, it's a story about stereotypes and thinking everyone of a certain group conforms to them, a situation that often puts characters like Hachisuke and Kurono in tough spots since they don't actually like attention. And then there are those that conform to the stereotypes to varying degrees and why, like Makio and Mike-kun. One of the biggest ongoing metaphors in the manga is connecting that of petting a cat with physical harassment. And the manga isn't even particularly subtle about it, like there's a character who pretty much says they misinterpreted purring as consent, like with that exact wording. And every single one of these characters that I mentioned are important to this mixed allegory. Makio himself is in this odd spot where he kind of perpetuates those stereotypes as a model. And Kurono and Mike seem to exist at exact opposite ends of the spectrum, one who absolutely rejects stereotypes and Mike who's been forced to embrace them. And both of these options are seen as ways to get by in the world they live in. But the manga also has its share of important human characters like Yoshihito. He's personally aware of how cats struggle to live their lives and is often confronted directly with the kinds of oppressive, bad attitudes that pervade society. Like, he just straight up gets told to let an off-comment slide and even invited to a cat cafe to do business. That idea that even if he knows that cats don't exist just to live out his fantasies, not every other person does. The human character Hitomi is actually the most interesting one if you ask me. Remember, she's the one that actually pet Hachisuke without a consent, and from there on, she drops out the manga. Okay, I say that knowing this manga is no more than like 7 chapters, so she's honestly not gone for a very long time. But she does come back, and I won't spoil what happens because it's probably the best moments of the manga. Because the biggest going theme of the manga, above even all the stuff about stereotypes and discrimination, is the idea that people can learn and grow and be better. Something we see happening constantly, and is the note the entire manga ends on. I also want to point out that the art style is really cute, but it's also very intentional. I can't really speak about that moment either, because it's best if you experience it for yourself, so that's really why I'm telling you to read this one. It's not just a good manga, it also has something to say that I think more people should hear. This manga does have an official English translation, and it's only 1 volume, so I definitely recommend you read it. Also, slight side note that has nothing to do with anything, but for some reason, the Barnes & Noble's listing for this manga has a Dandadan thumbnail. I just thought that was a little funny. And now for the final manga I'd like to talk about. Please, raise your hands if you've heard of Beastars. Now put your hands down when you realize you're listening to a pre-recorded video, but did you know that the Beastars we got was technically the second draft? Because, as the story online goes, Paru Itagaki, the creator of Beastars, was inspired to get into manga by the success of a doujinshi she sold in college. She sold in college, wow. For the longest time, the manga was hard as hell to come by, but it looked like someone finally did it. Beast Complex, not to be confused with the actual Beast Complex, still follows Legoshi and Haru, although neither of them are in school. Rather, Haru works in a cafe, and Legoshi is a photographer's assistant. And them being adults isn't really the only difference. For example, Legoshi still lives with Jack, but they both eat meat. Like just straight up regular meat from the back alley market. The entire dynamic of the story is just kind of shifted to go inside with the increased ages of the characters. It's Legoshi without a lot of the weird, stupid recklessness he's known for. It's Beastars, but more toned down and seemingly more realistic. And this alternate world we get is fascinating in its own right. The story actually places a huge emphasis on those silent social cues that just kind of sort of make society function. Like a carnivore not ordering meat flavoring if they're being served by a herbivore, or herbivores not being served by a carnivore waiter. It's like the main series in that despite society being functional, there's this undercurrent of tension. Lugosi pretty much thinks that to himself as he reads a story about it in the newspapers. The idea that the best things carnivores can do for herbivores is to basically pretend they don't exist. Which makes it all the more interesting when Lugosi and Haru actually do connect. Because the boundaries aren't legal or physical, they're purely social, so they're going against the grain by just interacting. And a lot of attention is placed on Haru and how she's kind of being estranged from her boyfriend Louis. Not really thinking about what's going on, just sort of falling into habits. And this simple interaction with Lugosi is something new, something interesting, something that finally breaks out of that. And the art is so distinct, like it's still a part of Itagaki's work, but it's just different from everything else we've gotten. It's most similar to the art in Volume 1 of Beast Complex, and yeah, that does make sense considering they were both made before Beastars itself was actually done. It's a lot less refined, with the lines a lot more messy. Like you can tell Paru Itagaki hasn't quite gotten the confidence she would gain with drawing Lugosi, Haru, and all the other animals. It really suits this prototype version of a story we'd all be familiar with later. If you like Beastars or Beast Complex, then I recommend you sift around online for this one because it will be a fascinating read. Oh, this video may not be longer than I thought it'd be, but it certainly took me longer to make. If you liked it, why don't you like and subscribe while I move on to our Patreon shoutouts. For 3 stars, we have special thanks to Choron, SkyKing64, 87 Warren, Galen Phasor, Chow Venomous, Loon78, The Good Old Days, and Stasi. For 4 stars, we have McCoy80s and Utterly Awe, The Life of a Rabbit. And for our super duper special 5-star shoutouts, we have Hodari Lion, The Life of a Wolf. Thank you for watching, do be sure to like and subscribe. As always, this is your host Fuuri, signing out.